Manager de ENEL en Perú, y vamos a hablar el día de hoy de un tema particular, la electrificación y cómo la electrificación se necesita para un futuro descarbonizado. Para eso vamos a tener una invitada especial, y quiero agradecer a Mariana, a Heinrich, por su participación. Mariana, ¿estás conectada? Hola Mariana. Mariana, ¿cómo estás? How are you? I'll switch to English.
Bien.
Okay. Now I'll switch to English y me pongo cómodo. Entonces, solo para presentar un poco a Mariana. Mariana es el director, es the Director of Energy of World Business Council for Sustainable Development. She's also in charge of the utility program working to decarbonize the power sector and creating new business models for energy companies. I know that Mariana has much more, but we just wanted to introduce you with these two very fast positions that you hold at the moment. So, Mariana, we're here today to discuss about the key of electrification for a low-carbon future. Now, I would like to put it in the context of the COP26, because we know that COP26 was quite an important event where we had quite an important result, which is that we defined an objective, which is the objective to limit the increase in temperature up to 2030 of 1.5 degrees Celsius. And I think right now we are definitely in a critical point to get to this result. Typical point, because we have something going on geopolitically which can impact all this, something which is going on economically which may impact all this, but at the same time it's something that already started. It's something that, in my opinion, cannot be stopped. So my first question to you is how every sector, because we already know that to reach these results we need to work together, all the sectors. And I would like to discuss with you which is the role of each single sector in reaching this 1.5, with this limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius, and which are the best performers, which sectors are the best performers in reducing impact, and why, in your opinion?
Thank you, Marco. Well, firstly, thank you very much to Peru Sostenible for inviting me to this important event today. I'm thrilled to be here with you, and it's nice to see you again, Marco. So your question, of course, is really important in light of the current energy crisis that the world is facing. You know, the impacts are strongly felt in Europe, are strongly felt in North America, but also felt in Latin America. And you asked about, like, you know, how do we overcome this? How do we have the best performers doing well in reducing their impact on climate change? Now, I would probably answer that question by saying that all sectors need to be best performers, because ultimately to achieve the 1.5 degree target, we're all going to have to cut emissions in all sectors, irrespective of where they are in their journey today. Now, of course, there are some sectors that are ahead of others, and if, you know, we'd like to talk through some of them a little bit, when I would use simply the emissions of those sectors as a guide to look at where are they today and where do they need to go, and hence, like, what is the challenge that they actually have to overcome to get there. The biggest emissions actually today come from the agricultural sector, because if we're looking at greenhouse gas emissions, it is the so-called emissions from agricultural use, from forestry use or other land use that make up nearly a quarter of the greenhouse gas emissions. And that is a sector that has been a strong focus of recent efforts around the world to address their emissions. Are they a best performer? Probably not quite yet, but they're doing a lot. They're doing a lot to get there. Secondly, the next biggest emission source is electricity production and heat production. And that is so important in light of the topic that we're talking today. So nearly a quarter of the emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, also comes from that source. So really, when we're thinking about what is their impact on climate change and how first could we reduce it, then the sector is having made great advances over the last 10 years, really, by implementing renewable sources of generation all across the world. But are they there? No, not much. So we need to do a lot more, a lot faster, because all countries of the world now have net zero emission plans in place. Not all of them have targets, but most of them have plans of how they'd like to reduce emissions, and most of them are relying on electricity. And so if we don't make the advances that we hope to make in the electricity sector, then how would other sectors ever follow suit that even have greater challenges to address? So we all need to be those best performers, and particularly in the land sector and in the electricity and heat production sector.
Perfect. So, exactly, I think that to have results in energy transition, as I said, we need to work all together, all the sectors. But there are some sectors which need to work a little bit more than other sectors because they are the biggest contributors to energy change, to climate change. Electricity production is one of these sectors. And I think we have a lot of challenges. We have a lot of challenges as a sector, both because we need to do something in generating electricity sustainably with renewables, but also enabling what is the electrification of the final users. And of course, we need these two to be done at the same time, because we cannot utilize energy which is not produced with renewables. Okay, so what are the biggest challenges in your idea, in your opinion, regarding the energy sector? And with energy here, I'd like to talk about not only electricity sectors, if not all the energy sectors, so oil and gas, energy, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about your questions in two ways. So we can look at the problem from the sectoral lens. So we can look at utilities, and we can look at oil and gas companies, and we can look at everybody who is supplying technologies as intermediaries. Now, the utilities across the globe have made great advances when it comes to reducing their emissions. And there's many different levers in place that help them do so, and also reporting frameworks that help them to show to the world what have they actually achieved and what else are they going to do more. Now, for most of the utilities, it is simply or very difficultly, but it's all about renewable electrification. Now, for the oil and gas company, completely different story, because who's an oil and gas company today is going to have to completely change their business model from reducing sales of oil and gas over time, and some more drastically, either slower, and ultimately not using that type of fossil fuel, particularly for power generation at all, and ideally also in other forms of energy use today. But I think when we're looking at the challenges, I'd rather like to think about it in terms of what are the levers for actually introducing change that gets either the utilities as well as the oil and gas companies or anyone who's a manufacturer or technology provider to the system, to the sustainable energy system that we like to have in the future. And so we generally think about four critical enablers. The first one is technology. And technology is, for most of the time in the energy system today, solved. We do have most of the technologies that we need to decarbonize the energy system. Are they all cost competitive? No. But we do have them from a technology perspective. Yes, there are a few exceptions. You know, exceptions make the rule, but generally technologies are there. Second one is demand. And that is very much pointing towards what you just said about the demand side of the energy system. So if companies who are using energy, if transport and built environment, and also you and me as individuals in the electricity and the heat that we consume in our homes, if we don't demand low carbon energy, then the system cannot change. And so for power, we've seen, again, great changes. A lot of businesses across the world are buying renewable electricity for their office buildings, for their manufacturing processes. But when we're looking at the heat that we're consuming in buildings as well as in manufacturing, there we see some challenges still, because it's difficult to switch from gas boilers to electric boilers. Not everywhere that works. And of course, then there's also heavy transport, shipping, and aviation industries that also need to increase their demand for low carbon alternatives. The third one is policy and regulation. And I know this is a particular challenge in Peru. And our point of view at the World Business Council is that we'd like to think that there is actions that every one of us, business as well as individuals, can take outside of the current political frameworks that we find ourselves in. Because we do see a business case, particularly for renewable electricity, everywhere around the world. And so many of us can act now and can act without taking into consideration the current policy environment. And that makes action so much more in our respective areas of responsibility and decision, so that we are almost freeing ourselves a little bit of the political environment. Of course, it is very important, but it gives you a chance to act. And then the fourth one is finance and investments. Now, the energy transition is expensive, yes, but it is much cheaper than not doing it. And that is simply why a lot of money from the business side, as well as from governments, is invested into helping the energy transition, if it may be in form of subsidies or research and development support for newly commercialized technologies. So those are the biggest enablers that we see, that of course in the negative phrasing are also the biggest challenges.
Sure. Well, entonces, so few takeaways, you know. Technology, we need technology. Technology is there. Technology is already there. Some of it is already competitive. Some of it still needs a little bit more to be competitive. But a big change is required from the behavior of the customers, behavior of the clients in terms both residential and industrial client. Now, to understand a little bit more how the behavior of the client can change, what do you consider the most relevant impact in terms of benefits as well that the green transition, of the energy transition, can bring to the clients?
Yeah. I'd like to answer your question looking at two different levels of benefits. So firstly, I think it's really important to think about the benefits that come for the society as a whole when we're looking at the green transition or the green electrification of energy end users. So the first one is efficiency. Electrification is the most efficient way of producing and using energy. It is much more efficient than fossil fuel technologies. So hence, it makes everything cheaper effectively by being more efficient. Secondly, also related to the cost aspect, is that most most solutions that rely on electrification have a very stable cost and hence very stable investment environment. So if somebody decides, either you and me in our households and our homes, decide to invest into an electrification technology, then it means we're going to know exactly what we're going to pay for it for the next 10 years, for the next 5 years, for the next 15 years. We can calculate that today. So it's very easy to have that stable environment of knowing what you're going to pay. Thirdly, it provides jobs and it provides economic development to communities and to entire countries. And fourthly, it's also about the health benefits. So particularly if we're looking at alternative forms of energy generation today, then electrification is a healthier option. Now, the second layer of impact that the green electrification also brings is that, of course, it improves the way that we live our daily lives. So when we're thinking about the option of having electric transport, electric cars, electric buses, even electric trains, which, by the way, are not common everywhere in the world, that brings all of the impacts that I listed earlier, but from our use of those options. The same applies to when we're thinking about how we're heating our homes. The electric boiler is going to be much more relevant for us as consumers, because we can directly control its operations, its cost, as well as the same applies to solar thermal solutions, to solar cooling solutions. All of them are local solutions that bring local benefits, that bring local jobs. And ultimately, that's all what we want. So hence, it's a win-win-win situation.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a win-win-win situation. So it's a benefit for the environment, it's a benefit for the customers, it's a benefit for the countries also, and for the progress of the people, How do you think all these strategies that we're promoting, they promote as well the increasing competitiveness of the countries and the progress with these people, mainly, as you mentioned already, the creation of new jobs, but what is else? What are the strategy of decarbonization, mainly based on renewables and electrification? How will they change the competitiveness of a country?
So let me answer the question with first thinking about what is sustainability today and how do we simplify sustainability, because we want to create a sustainable future for 9 billion people living on this world. So how do we do that, and what are the challenges that we need to overcome to do so? And really, to create a sustainable world, we need three essential things. We need to make sure that we have the climate emergency under control, that we're reducing emissions as fast as possible. We need to make sure that we restrict nature loss and that we help nature to regenerate. And number three, we need to address inequality in this world to an extent that brings people on the same, gives same people the same opportunities to thrive. And so hence, when I think about how do we promote people's progress, I think in all of these three elements together. So climate change, nature law or nature generation, equity are all part of the same agenda. And if we advance one of those, then we ideally also advance the other three at the same time. And electrification is one of those options that gives us that opportunity. It brings that stability and investment security. Hence, it enables people to lift out of poverty. It gives households and businesses an opportunity to generate income in a different manner that they have done before. And at the same time, it also helps us protect nature from other detrimental impacts that we've seen in the past. So really, it's a win-win challenge, and hence, we think that's a way to move forward if we want to think about how to create a sustainable energy system for the future.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Well, Yeah.
Marco, I was wondering, obviously, I've been bringing the global perspective to Peru Sostenible, and that's why I've been invited, so I hope I've been serving that purpose well. Now, I'm not as familiar with the environment in Peru. So from your perspective, what is your vision of how Peru is tackling its main challenges towards the energy transition? What do you think can it do more?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you very much for the questions, because it gives me the opportunity of discuss about how all these strategies that we have been talking at the global level, how they apply or they can be applied to Peru. Now, let's start about renewables generation. So the decarbonization of course, I'm talking about the energy sector because it's the sector where I work, but. In terms of the energy sector, I think there are three strategic goals that we need to get in the next few years, and one of them relates to the increase of the renewables generation in Peru. Now, let's start by saying that Peru, in general, has an energy matrix which is quite clean. In comparison with other countries now, but the paradox is that Peru has a resource, a natural resource, a renewable resource, which is one of the tops in the world, and still has only about 5% of the total production of the country coming from wind and solar, and I think in there. What we need to do in the country is to push a little bit more on the renewables generation, on the renewables development, and to do so, definitely we need a regulatory framework which does not incentivize renewables generation. We don't need incentives in renewable generation because renewable generation is already one of the technologies which is already cost competitive. So we don't need any incentive in renewables generations. What we need is a regulatory framework which takes away the disincentives that we have for the development of renewable generation. Here there is a regulatory framework for which is very difficult for a renewable generation, for renewable plants to contract directly to the final clients, and this of course creates an obstacle for the increase in penetration of renewables. So this is a first thing that, in my opinion, Peru is in a very good situation to take advantage of the great resource that it has by doing some small changes in the regulatory framework that would allow the renewables plants to participate in the market. The second thing is it's something that has to see with electrification. In my opinion, it's very difficult to being successful in the electrification of industries, of different sectors, if the distribution of electricity does not provide a quality of service which helps the companies to electrify its processes. So, you know, in a situation where the quality of service, the quality of distribution is poor, of course people will not go as much as they could through electrification. And in here, I think we need a lot of investments to be done in the grids, in the transportations, in the transmission system, in the distribution grids, to allow the quality of service to get better, and so the final customer to be to have a reliable and continuous supply of electricity, so that it can electrify some uses. I'm thinking about, for example, the preparation of food, the transportation as well. The other thing where Peru is working very well and very much in the last months is the direct electrification of some sectors. And here I'm talking about, firstly, the transportation sector. There is a lot of activity these days towards the electrification of the transportation sector. And this is because electrification is possible. We have the technology, and it has been proved that this technology is more competitive than the normal technology, gasoline technology, which with these very high gasoline prices, of course, makes the option to provide electricity, mobility with electricity much less expensive. Now, in terms of electrification, I think here we need what we said at the beginning, that all the sectors need to work together, need to have the same objective, need to understand that each single sector can contribute to the energy transition. And energy transition is not a cost. You said it perfectly at the beginning. Energy transition is a value. It's a value because it makes countries, it makes companies more competitive. So definitely it's something which is a win-win. You know, it's being more sustainable and at the same time being more competitive. And this is really where we need to work, power companies and all the other sectors to explain, to communicate that this is the reality. And I think from there, really decarbonizing all the sectors in Peru will be much, much easier. This is more or less what I think about the situation in here. Of course, we are at the beginning. It will take some time, but I'm very happy because I see a lot of fuss around this this move towards energy transition, and everybody now understands that energy transition is here to stay. It's not the future, it's the present. What we need to do is to accelerate the energy transition up to a point where definitely Peru and all the companies in here will be much more competitive in the global scale. Now, Mariana, I don't know if you have any final remarks. We just got at the end of our intervention. I think it was very interesting, at least for me it was very interesting to see or to hear what is the global perspective about energy transition and electrification. If you have any final remarks for our audience, I'll give you the floor.
I want to leave you with two messages. So with the first one, actually, I'm slightly going to contradict you. You just said we're at the start of the energy transition. I would probably say the energy transition has started 10 years ago. We're in the midst of it. And there is no going back. We're only moving forward from here. And, you know, the sooner everybody jumps on the train, the quicker we're going to get there. And it offers unique opportunities for countries, for business, and for individuals, like people like you and me and everybody listening today, to actually move on and supply their homes, their businesses with sustainable energy solutions. And the topic of today's session being electrification is one of the most sustainable ways of how we can do that, because it addresses all of the three imperatives of a sustainable world, being it addresses the climate emergency, it addresses nature, and it addresses equity in terms of making everybody more equal in accessing opportunities. Thank you.
Great. No, thank you very much, Mariana. Thank you very, very much for your presence for today and for the time you have put to...
My pleasure.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Y muchas gracias a todos ustedes por el espacio. Espero haya sido de interés para ustedes. Y bueno, todos entonces a luchar para la transición energética. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Marco, y thank you, Mariana, si todavía nos ve. Nos ha quedado muy claro que la electricidad alimentada por energía renovable es una solución eficiente y rentable, siendo a la vez limpia, asequible y de alto rendimiento. Hemos pasado una, creo, mañana entretenida desde la inauguración y cerrando con este par de presentaciones. Agradecemos a Camisea y ENEL por los espacios presentados. Ahora hacemos una pausa para almorzar y regresamos para conectar a las 3 de la tarde. Muchas gracias.